Hello, everyone. Wishing you an incredibly happy Valentine's Day. I hope many of you are out there deciding to spend at least some of today on your families and with your loved ones. And of course, we know there's still a lot of activity going on in the market. So we're going to jump right in. Today, we're going to be covering LA, Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. We're going to go over some different industry updates that are going on. And of course, as always, some announcements. So let's get right into sharing the screen. All right. There we go. And let me get a thumbs up if that screen share is, okay, 1 second. You got it. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, so jumping right in to our numbers. Now, you guys know I always have to start with the TCPA guidelines and disclaimer. We go through some scripts. We go through a lot of different things that you can talk about with your clients on this call. And with that being said, please make sure that you have permission to dial, that any of the lists that you have are scrubbed, my friends. All right, moving right along. Okay, so a couple things. As we gone over this the last couple of weeks, one of the updates that I do want to go over before we jump into where we are month to date, I do want to look at a quick look from December to January. The numbers are finally available. We know this is always about a week or two delayed here to be able to see where we're at. But where this jump was from December to January, and then we're going to look very quickly at where we are month to date from the 1st through the 13th of the month. So with that being said, we look at our numbers of properties for sale in Los Angeles County. We saw an increase of 8.1% from month to month. So from December to January, a decline from last year of 35.6%. Now we've been talking about this decline in terms of the inventory that is available across the board, right? We've seen a major decline of inventory, not just from this same time a year ago, which NAR speculates it's about a 20% drop, but about a 60% drop in inventory from 2 years ago. So that is a pretty significant dip. We can see right over here, month over month, well, we saw a little bit of an increase that is typical for this time of year with seasonality. The decrease from this same time last year is fairly significant. Same thing with the number of properties sold, down 30.6 month over month, down 9% from the same time last year. Now, if we look at month to date, again, here we see a slight increase in the number of properties for sale of 5.6, but a decline of 30.8 from this same time a year ago. We look at the number of properties sold, down 7.8% month over month, and down 27.6% year over year. Let's jump over to our inventory trends. Now, here we're seeing a pretty significant increase from December to January. Again, that is typical when we start looking at seasonality. That is something that is fairly normal for us, right? We tend to see that January tends to see an increase in the number of new listings coming on the market. These are all the homeowners that are saying, hey, I want to wait till the beginning of the year, or I want to wait till next year, right? This is when that follow-up happens. So we did see a pretty significant jump of 47.5% January from December, but a 17.4% dip from that same time period last year. And then an 8.2% month over month increase in number of properties pending, but a 6.2% decrease from this same time last year. We look at month to date. So again, in the month over month, we're tending to see an increase here, an increase of 10% in the number of new listings, a big increase in the number of properties pending month over month of 55.9%. So we are seeing those sales and transactions happening, right? But of course, all of these numbers are significantly lower than what we saw this same time period a year ago. With that being said, we know that in this same time period a year ago, we were dealing with the after effects of a skewed seasonality. So we saw major uptick in the fourth and first quarter last year, which is not typical. That is going to play a role here. And then when we're looking at just inventory in general, we know we're still significantly lower on that inventory right now. Looking at our pricing trends. So if we look at December to January, we saw a decline in the average active price, and yet our average sold price was still up 22% year over year. Let's look at where we're at month to date. So month to date, right? And I want you to see how these numbers have shifted a bit. Average active price down 5.4%, up 2.1% month to date. So from the 1st through the 12th of the year. We look at this price point over here. This one is pretty significant change as well. Average sold price, we're at about 22 from December to January. But if we look at the same time period a year ago, the increase is only 12.4%. We've been talking about this with pricing, and some of what we were probably going to anticipate moving into this year is a little bit of softening in our pricing trends. Not that the price appreciation is going to stop, but that it's going to soften, right? We saw a record-breaking appreciation last year. It stayed pretty consistent. It stayed pretty high throughout the course of the year. Obviously, because of the limitations that we have as it pertains to inventory, that is impacting price, right? That is impacting price. And it's not impacting price as dramatically as it was last year. That's where we're experiencing a little bit of this softening down to this 12.4%. Looking at our absorption rate. So we looked at December to January, we saw a uptick of 55.8%, typical seasonality. And then right over here, we're seeing this uptick of 27.9% month to date. So again, experiencing a little bit of that uptick doesn't take us into any other type of market. We are still in what is considered, right? What is considered a seller's market. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because of course this does not mean that it's a bad time for a buyer to buy, right? A lot of times when we think about what is a seller's market, what is a buyer's market, what is a balanced market, this is defined by months of inventory, right? It's defined by months of inventory. And yet that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a good time for a buyer to buy, right? Those are going to be different opportunities that exist. If you guys remember, we talked about this past week about really looking at helping buyers with maybe a 3-year plan. What is their long-term strategy to get into the home of their dreams, right? And being able to just build equity while they're on that journey. So homeownership is still an amazing vehicle to be able to create wealth, to be able to have an asset that you're invested into to earn equity. And so when we look at these absorption rates, I just want you to always take that with a grain of salt. All right, looking at our days on market and sold versus original list price. From December to January, we had an average days on market uptick of about 16%. We saw sold versus original list price stay fairly consistent. However, now we look over here, we look at month to date, January through February, we're seeing a decline in the average days on market of 6.9%. So a couple day difference here, but an uptick in this sold versus original list price. What is the only challenge here is that we've seen this particular number sold versus original list price. We've seen a lot of fluctuation week over week here. And the reason that this is important for us to look at is now we're seeing an uptick where it's at 101% of lists. We've seen this at 100%. We've seen it at 99. We've seen it at 103. We've seen it at 97. That's a lot of fluctuation that occurs. This becomes a challenge when we start looking at appraisal. Same thing when we have, sorry guys, this is what happens when all my stuff is attached, my friends. Let me go ahead and send that to decline. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties when we are on live, my friends. Okay, so with that being said, when we think about the fluctuations that occur here, right, from prices, this average, the sold versus original list price, this number going up, this number going down, this number popping back up, right? That fluctuation becomes a challenge when we go to appraisal. Why? Because one of the things that we know to be true in the last couple of years, 2 years, right? We've seen a lot of people coming in over ask. A lot of people coming in over ask. Now, we used to say market value is determined by what a buyer is willing to pay, that a seller is willing to accept, that the financial institution is willing to finance, right? That's the value of the property. But here's the thing. If a buyer says, well, I value this 20,000 more than appraised value, and I'm willing to come out of pocket with $20,000 above. What happens? We run into the challenge that the financial institution doesn't necessarily agree with that value. And yet the transaction still closes. And now you have a new comparable that was created in that market, $20,000 above what the financial institutions feel is the value of that property. That average, that means what happens? Our average active price starts going up because people are using those comparables, realtors are using those comparables to price out new listings and put those on the market. And so we see that price kind of continue to inch up. Then we have things like FHA appraisals that stick on the properties, all of these different things. So appraisals are coming into a situation, appraisers are coming into this situation, this market, where they're looking at what are the comparables that have recently sold in the area, but also in some cases, they may also be looking at what was the appraised value of some of these properties if they have access to that record, or what are the comparables that are in our area, and do we agree with that purchase price? Because at the end of the day, what the financial institution's job is when they lend on a property and when they're appraising a property is what they are saying is, do we believe that the value of this asset that we're willing to lend on is such that if the person that purchases the home was to default on their mortgage and we were to take this back, do we believe the value matches up with the asset that we're regaining? Right? That's really what their job is to protect the financial institution that is lending against the asset, the house. And so that's why when we look at some of this information and we start seeing a lot of these fluctuations, this is just where I want to encourage you as you are out there meeting with your clients to just be cognizant of those appraisals, make sure that you are pulling the comparables, that you have more insight about what actually is in the area so that you can bring some of that and really back up your appraisal. Because here's the thing, can you appeal an appraisal? Yes. Is it successful? I would say it's a challenging process, right? It has been done. It can be appealed. It can be appealed, and it is a challenging process. So I just wanted to go into that a little bit. All right, moving on over to Orange County. So again, looking from December to January, we saw an uptick in the number of properties for sale of 25.3%, a downtick in the number of properties sold of 27.5%. We look at this same time a year ago, so January of last year, we see a big decrease of 52.5%, the number of properties for sale, decline of 19.8% for the number of properties sold. When we look at the 1st through the 12th of the year, so this kind of first almost 2 weeks of the year, a little bit less than 2 weeks of the year, we're seeing an uptick in the number of properties for sale of 30.2% month over month. Number of properties sold down 19.2 month over month. From the same time a year ago, we're seeing a decline of 42.4% in number of properties for sale and a decline of 37.6 of the number of properties sold. So we are seeing a bit of a decline here. Inventory trends. We look at last month, so January to December, an uptick in new listings of 39.6%. That is pretty typical of a January and from December, right? Because we see a lot of those people saying, hey, now it's, you know what, I waited till the beginning of the year. All right, I'm ready to go ahead and list my property. And an uptick of 10.9% in number of properties pending. However, we are still, again, this kind of inventory trend that we're seeing is, even though we're starting to return to a little bit of the trends of seasonality, so we're seeing that uptick number of new listings, number of properties pending month over month. When we look at the same time period a year ago, we are undoubtedly across the board seeing that there is a decline in the amount of inventory that is coming on the market. So we can see that reflected here. When we look month to date, again, we're seeing an uptick, number of new listings up 5.4%. Again, fairly typical for this time period of the year, and an uptick of 53.6% in the number of properties pending. So more properties going into escrow right now than happened last month in Orange County. And again, sticking with the trend, a decline in the number of new listings and properties pending from the same time a year ago. Right. Looking at our pricing trends, average active price. This is a pretty significant decline here in Orange County from December to January of 12.3%. That's pretty significant there. And the other number we tend to pay attention to here, average sold price, a little bit of a decline month over month. But what we're really looking at here is the average sold price year over year. That's the conversation piece that you can use with homeowners in that area. Let's see how the chips fall when we look at months to date. So still a decline in average active price. However, month to date, we're seeing an increase in this average sold price. And then this average sold price year over year is pretty high still. So we saw a decline when we looked at LA County. Orange County tends to have less, it's a smaller county, so there's less homes. Price point is higher. So these percentages have a much bigger impact in this area. And this is a pretty significant impact here, 23.6% average sold price increase from this same time period a year ago. So I'm talking to homeowners in this area, and I see that the average active price is experiencing a decline. That's a tool to create urgency, right? That's a statistic to create urgency. Do you know that home values at the average sold price in this area has gone up by 23.6% over the course of the last year? Do you know the value of your home? Would you like to? Right? But if they're being hesitant and they are interested in selling, so if they are actually interested in selling and there's some hesitancy that we're experiencing, then we may want to have a conversation of the average active price actually experiencing a decline of 8.3%. How long are you going to wait to take advantage of the equity that you've gained in the last year? Right? Especially as we're starting to see this average active price go down, that is going to reflect in the sold price in the coming months. Okay. Now looking at months of inventory, an increase month over month, 0.4 to 0.7 doesn't move us into any significant market. And we read about 0.6 these first 2 weeks up to about 0.1. We are seeing these absorption rates experiencing a little bit of an uptick across the board here. And yet nothing so significant that it's going to move us into a different market type. And last but not least, our days on market and sold versus original list. So from December to January, we experienced no change in days on market. Sold versus original list, there was a 1% change. And we see that 1% fluctuate back down month to date. So again, we're seeing a lot of these fluctuations, right? 100%, 101%, 99%, 100%, right? And with those fluctuations come the challenges that we experience at appraisal. Okay, Riverside County sales trends. Now looking at Riverside County. When we look at the number of properties for sale, January through December, we saw a slight downtick of 0.5%. Number of properties sold, a downtick of almost 25% here. When we look at the same time period a year ago, we're also experiencing that decline, which is pretty typical across the board right now. When we look at month to date, however, look at this. We can see the number of properties for sale. We're actually starting to experience an uptick of 3.3%, an uptick of 0.2% from last year. That's significant, right? Because in most of these, we're seeing that inventory dip, number of properties for sale number has dipped, and we're seeing an increase from last year in Riverside County specifically. Number of properties sold, downtick of 10.9%. In month over month, and then down 28.2% from this same time period a year ago. We look at our inventory trends. So look at this. From December to January, major uptick. Number of new listings up 39.1%. Number of properties pending up 22.5%. We, of course, are seeing a downtick in the number of new listings, but this isn't as severe from last year as it is in some of the other counties that we've already looked at. It's only at 8.4% decline. When we look at months to date, again, we're still seeing this significant uptick in the number of new listings at 0.6% and number of properties pending at 44.9% increase here. So properties moving in Riverside County for sure. Number of new listings, when we look at this same time period a year ago, down 21.4%, staying pretty consistent with the trend here, and down 0.6% in number of properties pending. Let's look at our pricing trends. This is actually green, all four. We have an average active price month over month that increased from December to January, an average sold price that increased from December to January, and then from this same time period a year ago, also experiencing an increase, Again, when we really experiencing price increases, a lot of this has to do with supply and demand. So we know that these work hand in hand. The more demand there is and the more limited the supply, the higher the prices, right? That is always going to dictate our price. Now, when supply is high and demand is not there, we see prices decline, right? Because everybody's competing for a limited number of purchasers, buyers. So we see that this is going up as we are having inventory challenges. We can see that reflected in changes in price. And then we look at just where we are this month to date, an average active price increase of 0.6, average sold price increase of 1.4. Look at this increase in the average sold price from a year ago of 18.6%. Do you know that the average sold price in your area has gone up by 18.6%? Just out of curiosity, do you know the value of your home? Would you like to? Would you be offended if I did a market analysis for you? Right? These are the conversations that we can have. All right, absorption rate, uptick of 46.2% from a year ago, an uptick of 23.5%. So either way, we're seeing a little bit of that increase. I do want you to see where right here we saw a major downtick in December, and we can start seeing that going up here in January and now following into February. Still not moving us into any significant change in the market, and yet it's important for us to kind of monitor. All right, so looking at where we ended in January from December, we had an uptick of 12% on days on market. And this number right here, we actually had seen a downtick of this 1% in sold versus original list price. However, look at this fluctuation back up to 100% right here, month to date. So again, these fluctuations are small, and yet they have a big impact because we're seeing the comps are there, the comps are not there, the comps are there, the comps are not there, right? So this is just important for us to kind of look at as we're monitoring sold versus original list. Okay, last but not least, our San Bernardino County sales trends. We look at number of properties for sale, slight dip month over month, only 0.1%. That's not a significant change here, but up 20.7 from a year ago. Down 22.9% in the number of properties sold month over month, and down 5.9% year over year. We look at month to date, we see an uptick of 11.8% in the number of properties for sale, a major increase from the same time last year of 32.4%, and then a downtick in the number of properties sold of 11.6% month to date, and down 19.4% from that same month to date a year ago. Looking at our inventory trends, we see these upticks in new listings and that downtick from a year ago. Again, we're a bit of that seasonality from December to January, and then the inventory shortage that we're seeing when we look year over year. Number of properties pending up 13.1% month over month from December to January, and then up 2.7% from the same time period a year ago. Let's look at where we're at month to date. Number of new listings up 0.3% month to date, right? Number of properties pending up 14.5% month to date. We look at the same time period a year ago, and sticking with the trend, we see that decline down 22.4% and down 12.9% in properties pending. Let's look at our pricing trends. So we saw that average active price from December to January. We saw a little bit of a dip here. And yet this average sold price, we saw an increase. Where are we month to date? Average active price going in the opposite direction. So these price fluctuations, again, price fluctuation, right, happening, and then sold versus original list price, there's a lot of fluctuation that we're seeing there as well. This is where, just as you're pricing property in those areas, if you're taking a listing and you're pricing property, make sure to be cognizant of what the numbers are really telling you, right? Just because there are comparables listed at a very high amount, it's also important to look at sold versus original list price on your comparables. Because when you're pricing a property, the client, right, your client, the homeowner, they get very excited about the higher price points. So if they see a bunch of comparables, they see that their neighbor's home sold for $770 and their other neighbor's home sold for $760 and $765, all of a sudden they want to list their home at what, $760 to $770. Now, if those properties were originally priced lower, maybe those properties were priced at $750 and they sold at $770 in a bidding war, right? We want to make sure that we are sharing that with our clients so that they price competitively to also experience that similar sort of bidding war. Because if all of a sudden they price their property at $770, you also want to look at what homes are active on the market that their property would be competing against, right? And you price it at $770 because something else sold at $770, but that property was originally listed at $750, right? Now we run into some challenges of, are we going to get the same level of exposure? I will say this right now, because of the inventory shortage, you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on your property no matter what, right? You're going to get a lot of eyeballs on any listings that are out there. The challenge is going to happen when we get to the appraisal in that scenario, right? Original property price at $750, sells at $770, uses that as comp, prices at $770. And all of a sudden you have offers that have come in higher and the comparables are not truly there to get the appraised value. So this is why we want to be cognizant of looking at all these factors when we're pricing out on property. So yeah, average active price, we see this increase of 4.3% month over month. Take a look at this average sold price. So unlike Orange County, where we saw this number stay pretty significantly high, this is a little bit more similar to what we saw in LA County, which is at about 12%. Average sold price at about this 11.4% here. Absorption rate went up month over month, 0.8 to 1%. And then where we're at month to date also went up. So this has been a trend all across the board here that we're seeing increases in our absorption rate, which is just a way of saying that there's the inventory on the market is sitting a little bit longer. It's not less than a month. We're at 1.4 months of inventory on the market. And then last but not least, days on market and sold versus original list price. Saw a decline on days on market as we went from December to January. Sold versus original list price stayed pretty stagnant here. And again, look at this fluctuation from 101 to 99% here. Like I said, on the appraisal issues, just make sure you're being very cognizant of that as you're going through, especially as we look at these different counties. All right. Jumping on over. So we're going to talk about a couple things really quickly. Do the database too. You guys know we've talked about this now. This is our 6th week going over do the database too. What is do the database too? As we go through our database, we experience something called call bias. It is very easy to get into your desk and say, okay, I'm going to lead generate today. I'm going to make all the calls on my database. I'm going to do follow-up today. And just start calling from the top. And what happens is when you run out of momentum or when you're not consistent with it, all of a sudden you forget where you left off, or certain people in your database don't get called, or maybe you only called the people that actually express interest in potentially buying or selling. And there's so many other people that are in your network that you could be earning referrals from. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's been 8 months since the last time you talked with them, right? And they've either already taken action or already had a friend or family member that purchased or sold. Now, when we do the database too, we do our regular lead generation activities and we call anybody in our database that has the last 2 letters from that week. This week, week 6 being F and G, right? F and G. So anybody who's got a last name with an F and a last name with the G. All right. A couple things. So we've talked about this. I want to give you guys a couple updates and then I'm going to talk about some stuff that's not on here. I'm not going to jump into this too much here. What I do want to remind you is we know that California mortgage relief is currently available in Los Angeles County. Not in Los Angeles County, in the state of California. We have California mortgage relief that is available for your clients. They can receive up to $80,000 grants that is paid directly to their financial institution to basically make up the loss of their mortgage. We know that there is a percentage of individuals that will not qualify for this program. A couple things on how this program is going to work. And we've talked about this again and again. So I'm going to give you guys the quick bullet point reminders. They have to have experienced pandemic-related financial need, and their income has to be at 100% or below of the area, that particular area's median income. in order for them to qualify. In addition, their financial institution has to be accepting the program. So if the financial institution says, no, we're not accepting this grant money, which I'm not sure why many of them would say no for getting their payment back, right? But if they are not opted into the program, then the client does not have that option. Also, if the client has the ability and has been given the ability by their financial institution to modify their loan, that is going to be a precedent over them getting this grant money. It is a grant. When it runs out of money, it's out of money, right? With that being said, a couple other things that I wanted to know. We've been talking a lot about Senate Bill 9 and 10. We've also been talking a lot about the extension of the COVID-19 tenant protections. I'm going to note a couple of these are going to be California-wide. So I'm going to start off with California-wide. Mortgage relief is California-wide, right? Senate Bill 9 and 10 is California-wide. Senate Bill 9 and 10 is essentially eliminating single-family residence zoning to opt for the ability to create up to 4 units with Senate Bill 9 or up to 10 units, depending on the plot size and depending on the regulations of each individual city. Why is this important? I'm going to note there's also housing element. I want to give you guys some updates that are new updates that we're hearing about right now that are local to the city of Downey, some of the surrounding areas as well. Housing element was basically works directly with the census, meaning after the census is completed, each city, they go based on census data and also do an environmental survey in each city to make sure that the allocation that is assigned for the housing element is going to be sustainable in that particular community environmentally, right? And then they give an allocation. What that allocation is housing that must be constructed in that particular area over the next 8 years. Downey's allocation is about 6,500 homes that need to be constructed over that time period. There is also homes that are, this is every city, right? So I'll give you an example. Montebello got their allocation of homes. They currently have a housing development project that has already been pre-approved, that is pre-existing, that they're working on, that's going to construct homes to the tune of 1,200 homes. That is not included in their new allocation. Okay, so they have to construct an additional, I believe theirs was upwards of 5,000, an additional 5,000 new homes in the city of Montebello over the course of the next 8 years. In Downey, the allocation is about 6,500. So there's actually a project that is currently being looked at the county level, right? This is at the county level. I can't give you all the information yet because we're still gathering information on this. But there is going to be a development that is currently being looked at, which is over by, for those of you that are familiar here in Downey, if you're familiar, we're over by the animal shelter is. There's an area out there that they're looking at a major development project at the county level to help meet the city housing element allocation. Why do I bring this up? It's important for us to know about these things in our farm areas, right? In our cities. I'm giving you 2 examples of 2 cities that are currently figuring out how they're going to meet their housing element allocation. With that being said, these big development projects are not going to be possible everywhere. So we're going to see rezoning, right? Even in that particular development project that's going to be happening here in Downey, one of the things that we're looking at is that current land is, it's commercial, right? It's currently commercial. So it's basically getting rezoned to be able to meet the demand of the housing element residential construction requirements that are in play. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. There's going to be a lot of stuff that we see, but we've been talking about this since as it was in process before the beginning of the year. And then of course, this year, as it came into effect, both the Senate Bill 9 and 10 and the housing element, allocations that have come into effect, we're already seeing, we're mid-February, and we're already seeing a lot of movement around how cities are really striving to accommodate this in their plan. On the flip side of that, we also have cities like Carson, Torrance, and Redondo Beach that are joining legal efforts to render Senate Bill 9 invalid. And there's another organization called Neighborhood Initiative that is in signature collecting phase to really try to put something on the ballot in November to render Senate Bill 9 and 10 essentially invalid. So there's a lot of movement that happens with this, but it's important because a lot of times we don't realize the impact that legislation has on our industry. this legislation is specifically very housing oriented. There's a lot of additional legislation that's going to be coming down the pipeline that is also going to have an impact on us. So you guys know during census times, we also see a lot of things like we see redistricting, right? And so we're seeing a lot of that right now based on some of the changes that occurred in the census, which means there's a lot of political change that happens with state assembly, with the Senate, with city council, a lot of these different things that get impacted by things like the relining of the districts. And so that's one of the things that's happening right now. How does this impact us in real estate? Well, here's the thing. There's always policy like the policy that we're talking about right now that gets written by people that hold these different seats in these different positions. So when we see changes in how this is lined up, and we see changes in some of the candidates that are going to come into play, because this is going to have a major impact over the course of the next year, as the new district lines are going into place this year. That has an effect on who is basically advocating for policy that helps us sustain our industry, right? Our realtor industry, and policy that impacts whether there's going to be additional creation of inventory when we're experiencing an inventory shortage, or are we going to experience challenges? So that's part of why I wanted to share this. I also wanted to share this because tomorrow, as part of our all partners meeting, so our team meeting here at the office at 3 p.m., we are having a guest. And that guest is the government affairs director for the Downey Association of Realtors, Louis Lujan. We're really excited to have him out here so he can share a little bit of what he is seeing with So he has more of his finger on the pulse of what is happening at the legislative level. And so he's going to be giving us that legislative update specific to our industry. And then with that being said, I also wanted to mention, we know that the eviction moratorium for Los Angeles County has been extended through the end of the year. It is a two-phase program. It's important to really look at it, right? And look, I know we've gone over it a couple of weeks already in a row, but it's important to look at it because there are pieces in there that are kind of built in for if somebody is purchasing a property and they do intend to own or occupy. There's some language that's built in for that. There's some language around commercial tenants that's a little bit different from how it works for residential tenants. So all of those things kind of come into play with the tenant protections resolution program as well. All right. And then with that being said, all of these are an opportunity for you to call your clients, right? All of these are an opportunity to follow up with your database. All of these are an opportunity to create content. Whether you're talking about mortgage assistance, right? It's a little bit of a different call when we call somebody in our database, and instead of going straight for the, who wants to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, right? That was an old school script from back in the day. I don't know that I've ever used that script because it never felt comfortable for me, right? And yet when we're able to call somebody in our network and say, hey, you know what? I wanted to give you a call. You were on my mind this morning because obviously you're somebody that I really care about. And I wanted to share that there's this great mortgage assistance program that's available. And I wanted to see if you had any questions on it or if it might be something that you need, right? If they're a homeowner. Some of them are going to say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for thinking about me. Actually, yes. Can you send me that information? And some of them might say something like, you know what? No, thankfully we're in a great position. And no, we don't need any sort of mortgage assistance right now. And that is the opportunity for us to say, great, I'm so happy to hear that. And I don't know if you know this, but home appreciation has gone up 14% over the course of last year. Just out of curiosity, would you like to know the value of your home? Right? It gives us the in to have the conversation. But it's also authentic because we're caring on people, we're loving on people, we're giving them the solutions that are important to them. Because here's the thing, what we don't know, I'm a big believer that lead generation is an opportunity to find people to help. What we don't realize sometimes is that in the last 2 years, there's been so much that has shifted in this market. There's been so much that has changed. There are individuals that are dealing with family losses that have impacted their financial situation, right? And I share this because I've seen this happen in my own network of somebody that the breadwinner becomes gravely ill, and all of a sudden, the only thing that they have to get cash out that they might need is the house, right? Is the option. And so maybe when we're not having these conversations with the people in our world, in our network, sometimes we're cheating them on the opportunity to do the thing that is best for them and is going to help them during a very difficult time, right? Notice of default's the same thing. People that are defaulting on their mortgage and need help. Absentee owners that maybe are freaking out because they're mom and pop and they can't sustain this eviction moratorium when they have tenants that are not paying rent. It's not that they don't want to, but that they can't, or that it's become too stressful on them. Those are all an opportunity for us to have a conversation, provide value, and find the people that need our help right now. But we cannot find them if we don't go out and have as many conversations as possible. Because here's the thing, nobody is going to get mad because you loved on them too much and you gave them too many resources. We get nervous that we're going to bother people. And in reality, all we're doing here is helping people, right? So with that being said, I know that was a lot of information, a couple of announcements, dates and announcements, my friends, that I want to make sure to bring up. One, like I mentioned, all partners meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. here at the office. We have some Valentine's decorations. We're going to be talking about where we're at with the Loving on Listings competition as well. You know, we have some great prizes that are coming up. We've seen those listings come in. I'm getting from you guys, I've gotten people sending over that, hey, I did a CMA. Hey, I wanted a listing appointment. Hey, I scored this. We come and see us so that we can get you those raffle tickets, my friends, or, hey, I did a social media advertisement through Command. I did a postcard, etc. Right? Let's make sure we are getting you your raffle tickets for that as well. And then with that being said, we are going to have a very special event on March 8th. So I want you to save the date. For many of you, if you can save the date for, it's going to be an all-day event that we're going to be doing here at the office. We know KW has our family reunion, our mega conference that happens every single year. And we are going to be celebrating that in office on March 8th. We are going to be playing Gary Keller's vision speech, where he goes over market analysis and a major market update. Honestly, if you like the format of the market update that we do, Gary's is on steroids, right? 100 times. 100 times. He goes over all kinds of things. It's going to be a really great session. We'll do some panels. We're going to have food, breakfast, and lunch. And then in the evening, we are going to be doing, so we know our office is open for us, but grand reopening for our community. So we are really excited about that. We cannot wait to celebrate with all of you. And our 100K plus program is going to be launching, I believe, next week on Wednesday evenings. That is live in office. So keep an eye on the calendar. I know we've got scripts and role play, broker hour 3 times a week that has been going on. Make sure you are tuning in to those sessions. With that, I hope you all have an absolutely phenomenal day, and I will see you tomorrow, my friends. Bye.